my wonderful next guest, who is Kellie-Jay Keen, the wonderful Kellie-Jay Keen, women's rights campaigner, but much more than that, living legend, I would say. Kellie, it's so good to have you on the show. It's been a while since we had a chat.
Well, I heard that you were wearing yellow, so...
I just saw that. Look at that. That is... I like that. That's cool. So let's start... First of all, actually, let's veer back in a moment to this misogyny as a hate crime. You tweeted something, if that is still the verb that we use in the context of X, earlier today, which I just really want to ask you about, which is, you know, you said to women, be careful what you write in WhatsApp groups, be careful what you're talking about online when you're sort of talking about defending single-sex spaces and so forth, because the police might come and feel your collar. What's going on, Kellie?
Well, look, I got my collar felt back in 2017. 2018 I was interviewed, but 2017 they contacted me about tweets. And I happen to know that a police force, which I can't name, has recently arrested a woman. Somebody else messaged me, a man, about stuff online where he got a battering ram. He got arrested also for tweets about men pretending to be women. But this particular woman was told that they would swab stickers for DNA. And they seized their phone. And what we know about a lot of these investigations is the process is a punishment. They might not end up charging her with anything. It might never go to court, but they will take her phone. So I just said to people, you know, just be sensible. Don't have your face to open your phone or any apps.
That's the idea of swabbing stickers for DNA. I'm guessing these stickers said things along the lines of, you know, woman is an adult human female, rather than anything that's inciting hatred or violence.
Yeah. I mean, you say inciting hatred, and I, like you, I really loathe the idea that our police are worried about anything that we say, apart from inciting violence. So when it comes to women, I just think we've now got these wonderful courts, and there's lots of space in prisons. And so I think it'll be a fairly easy thing for police to come and, you know, some overzealous officer to come and arrest a woman, take her phone, go through all her contacts, and then they've got access to anybody else that she's been talking to in any of the many, many groups that women belong to.
This is absolutely terrifying. And what's worse, you know, you do so much to protect women and keep women safe, something I feel really strongly about. And this whole mad idea that anyone can say, I'm now a woman, and enter a single-sex space. I mean, we've been having this conversation for a long time. It's just ghoulish. It's frightening. And then preventing women being able to talk about it is a bit rich from the same government who now want to turn around and say misogyny, there should be a misogyny extremism law. Now, what I don't understand is, for a long time now, and we've seen some of the things that you've had to face, which has actually basically brimmed over to physical threats and threats of violence and death threats and all the rest of it. All of those people on the other side shouting and spitting at you should have been lifted by the police a long time ago, but they seem to get away with it, and yet what comes out of their mouth is usually absolute unbridled misogyny. So how, dear Labour, are you going to make it that you know, you protect your trans community and do the whole trans rights matter dance, and then at the same time say, oh well, but we're going to outlaw misogyny? They're going to end up with a real big problem when it comes to the hierarchy of victimhood, aren't they?
Well, I think what will end up with women being accused and charged with misogyny hate crimes for acknowledging that men can't be women. I recently had a woman phone into my turf talk, and she talked about asking for a chaperone, and the person that came in to chaperone when she was having an intimate exam with a consultant was a man calling himself a woman. So she then ended up in a situation in the NHS with two men in a room, and one of those was supposed to be a female chaperone. So if she raises that as an issue, let's say she decides to name the hospital and the consultant and everything, she could be guilty of an extreme misogynistic hate crime. It's nuts.
That is absolutely balmy. So a woman protecting the safety of women could be accused of hating women. I mean, that is just, it makes no sense. Nothing about the 21st century makes sense when it comes to this department. I mean, I do think when it comes to these sort of like grim little keyboard warriors sitting in their mother's basements or whatever, the incel community, that, yeah, that needs to be dealt with, because that is just really horrible and grotesque. But there must be a whole raft of legislation in place already that when people are joining little groups saying, I know, go and, you know, perpetrate awful things against women, that's very clear, you know, in the current climate of, oh, well, you've incited violence, so you're going to prison, done and done. To me, you don't need a specialist category for this is, you know, particularly a misogynistic crime. But how do you feel about this? Because the thing is, as a woman, when we know that we are in so much danger from very real world things, okay, from actual physical crime, from being the targets of things like mobile phone muggings far more than men are, from, you know, rape and harassment and all these other things which seem to be getting worse by the second, I would rather the focus was on that stuff rather than the language people use. And yet, you know, as a woman, you kind of feel like, oh, well, you know, this might be a step in the right direction. Do you think it has a place to be discussed, or could it be counterproductive?
Like I said, look, this government doesn't know what a woman is, so I don't really understand the point of this sort of idea whatsoever. But in addition to that, I think women are so used to the sort of abuse and harassment that comes our way all the time that I don't think many women could be bothered to report it. I tried to report a crime where somebody literally named my kids, had threatened me, had phoned me, had been really abusive. And the whole process was going to take sort of 4 to 6 hours. And I just thought they're not really going to do anything anyway. I think most women won't be bothered to report it. And those people that do report it are more likely, I think, to be men calling themselves women. I think they'll report a lot of misogyny.
I'm going to bring in Benedict Spence now, who's patiently sitting with me. He was supposed to go at 8 o'clock, and I said, hang on for this one, Benedict, because it's an interesting conversation. You know, one thing that I don't understand how this is all going to unravel is we did a report, an exclusive report here at Talk, into radical clerics, Islamic clerics, using YouTube to broadcast their sermons, whatever you want to call it, saying all sorts of really quite horrific things. And one thing that you see that is said a lot is, you know, the treatment of women under Islam isn't always particularly fair or nice. You know, you can see that when people have to dress up like ghosts and walk around the place. And the idea of, you know, things like polygamy and concubines and so on and so forth. We've seen with grooming gangs some of these more medieval viewpoints that can happen within pockets of that community. And I'm certain there'll be plenty of imams out there. I'm not saying it's going to be the majority, but there are plenty of them out there who probably spout some of the most horrible, threatening and disgusting language when it comes to how women should be treated and viewed in society. Now, what happens when someone sees that? It's on YouTube, free for all. You're not just, you know, in the mosque joining in and listening to it. And you report that to the police, and then, Islamophobia's there as well. I mean, Benedict, who's going to win that one?
I mean, it's the direction that we travel in will be very curious. As much as anything else, one of the things you do notice when it comes to policing in this country is the concept of community policing, and that is the local police discussing with community leaders. Nobody's ever quite sure who they are or how they got there, but they're there. Different approaches to police these things. And what you'll probably find is that because no complaints will be raised from within the community itself, it won't be pursued. And of course they won't be pursued within the community itself, because actually the majority of women in those communities are, in that sort of very extreme circumstances, are going to be cowed, they're going to be intimidated, because that's actually how a lot of this works. And you're right to say that it's not all, and this is one of the things I think that sort of liberal metropolitan Londoners tend to assume, that there is just this one sort of monolithic Muslim community. There isn't. There are very many different ones with different interpretations of their text. But the directions that we can go in is this sort of thing where effectively by the back door, by not looking, turning a blind eye, you do have, as we've talked about, two-tier policing system that'll lead to a sort of an Ottoman millet system where you have sort of unofficial community relations where community leaders are able to sort of deal with things in-house and not very much is said. Or we will have to go down the sort of the French secular route and be very aggressive about it. Now, I don't think that our authorities have the gumption to do that sort of thing in this country, but it is the only way you can deal with that sort of thing if you indulge it to a point where it is too large to ignore. Yeah, I mean,
Kelly, it's sort of like, to me, this ties in with what you were saying earlier about this misogyny hate crime, is the people who end up using the sort of hurty words as a criminal offence tend to be the people who are on the extremes.
Yeah, and can I just say, I'm self-appointed the community leader for all women in the UK, so I'm expecting a press conference with the police at any moment. But when it look, I just think a crime should be a crime should be a crime. I don't really care who's doing it. I don't care who the crime is against. I don't think that should make any difference for anyone. I think if you're saying something that's inciting violence, then that's a crime, and if you're not, then it isn't. If you're saying something like deeply harmful, that incites violence amongst women, even if those women are married women to people and you're telling their husbands to beat them, then I think it shouldn't really matter who's saying it, what excuse they have. I think we're all a little bit fed up with one rule for one and a different rule for another group. And I think that's what people are very, very cross about. Yeah,
I mean, I couldn't agree more. And actually, where has common sense gone? It's disappeared. We've all got to internalise everything because it's all our unconscious bias and our prejudice. Now, before I let you go, Kelly, here's another one. So apparently Angela Rayner wants to crack down on workplace harassment, which, again, on the surface of it, you think, well, that sounds good, doesn't it? It'd be nice to go to work and not be felt up or told you're a silly little girl or something like that. But by and large, I don't know how much this goes on in workplaces anymore, and we have legislation in place for that. I know, I have used it, but not for anything that was, you know, minor, by the way. But, you know, the typical Telegraph headline, but I kind of understand where it's going with this. It says, Rayner's crackdown on workplace harassment spells the end of the office party. It's a similar thing, isn't it? When you end up, like you were saying, you know, if you incite violence, it doesn't matter who you are or who it's against, you've incited violence, easy peasy. Crime is crime, and we've got legislation in place that deals with that. And I do think we have, when it comes to sexual harassment, legislation in place. We've got, if it comes to assault, you know, if someone is, you know, touching you the wrong way, or that we've got legislation in place. So what is it that Angela Rayner wants to bring in? Because as far as I recall, back in the day, a lot of couples met each other at work and snogged under the mistletoe at Christmas time and then have gone on to have very happy families.
Are we grown-ups or not? I don't know. Are we? I think we're all grown-ups. I think once you've started work, you're pretty much a fully-fledged adult, and you should be able to deal with certain things in a social situation with work colleagues. I don't think it means that the office let should be able to pour his hands all over you, and I think you should be able to deal with that. And I think I'm not even sure that should be criminal if swiftly dealt with. But it's just peculiar. It's just another kind of invented problem so somebody can solve it. And actually, I think we do have really good working practices. Employers have to have certain policies in place and deal with things very, very swiftly. I'm not really sure it's the government's job to do any more work in this. I suspect there are some state-paid roles where harassment is pretty horrendous, for example, the police. So I think maybe they need to look at their own house before they start thinking about other people.
Yeah, I think you make a very good point. Do you know what else I always think, talking to you, Kelly? It's this idea that, you know, the feminists are not doing the feminism anymore, are they? They're not actually protecting girls against real-world harm, like, you know, creepy men putting on dresses and going into the Girl Guide's tent, or, you know, the sexual harassment and increased risk to women that might be as a result of some of the unbridled immigration we've had from men from very different cultures where they don't really understand women's rights. The feminists have completely vacated the field when it comes to that, and instead of worrying themselves over stuff like wolf whistles and, you know, the sort of stuff that, frankly, like you said, a grown-up woman goes,
yeah. Manspreading. I mean, manspreading, we're all allowed to talk about manspreading as if it's the most evil thing that ever happened, in mansplaining. But you're not allowed to talk about the naked man in the changing room with your daughter.
I know, it's mad. Well, I'm just going to check under the desk to see if Benedict is manspreading as I ask him to mansplain. What do you think?
Perpetually.
Oh, I can't see under the desk.
No, you can't. There's a great that's because I'm being harassed in the office place.
You are being harassed in the workplace. I was actually going to see if your legs were apart.
What I was going to say was, do you know where there is rather a lot of sexual harassment going on in the office? Houses of Parliament.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Houses of Parliament.
I love a bit of it over there.
You know, because, you know, when you work in this industry, as you and I have done for a very long time, and you hear some of the stories about MPs, about staffers, about all sorts of things, and you think, how on earth are they able to get away with that kind of behaviour? But every couple of years, a big story comes out, a big scandal comes out, and we're told there's many more like this. It really is very bad, and so it's desperately ironic, I think, to hear MPs talking about...
Yeah, who'd have thought having late working hours and people away from home 4 nights a week and a subsidised bar that's open, you know, 24/7 is a bad idea. I mean, I quite like the idea of a subsidised bar. Message to the bosses. But there you are. Kelly, it's been amazing talking to you, and let's talk again soon, because we got a lot of work to do, haven't we?